Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. I am your host, Blythe Brumleve, and we are proudly presented by SPI Logistics, and we got another good episode for you today. We have Beth Potratz. Did I say that right? I feel like I just messed it up
Absolutely.
already.
Nice
Okay,
job.
good. She is the founder and CEO of Drive My Way, and we are going to be talking about what the hell's going on in driver recruiting, driver retention, and finding jobs that drivers love or creating a job that drivers love. So, Beth, I've been wanting to get you on the show for a while now. I feel like we've been talking about it for a long time, so I'm happy this is finally happening.
Me too. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, I think that you have a really fascinating career backstory. You come from the world of HR before you started Drive My Way. I'm curious though, what was the catalyst for you to say, I'm going to start my own company?
So, honestly, I've been in HR my whole life, and I was fortunate enough to start in consumer products for a family run business called Helene Curtis. You'll probably recognize some of the big brands like Suave and Dove and Degree and those types of brands, like real household staples. And I left that job to move back home to Cleveland, Ohio, and worked for Rockwell Automation. Well, it's a big difference working for, industrial automation versus consumer products. And I was actually trying to recruit engineers to move to Cleveland in the late 90s. And I thought to myself, wow, employers are going to start to need to look at employees as consumers of the employment relationship because your needs will change throughout your career and what you're looking for in a job is most certainly going to change. It can't really be a one size fits all. So that was way ahead of its time. We were in the midst of just introducing cafeteria benefit plans back then. And I thought, well, I will just table that idea, but I think it's a pretty, positive approach. So fast forward, I actually went back to Unilever and then left again, and launched my own HR consulting practice. And I was redesigning a driver recruiting process for a large carrier. And I thought, this is the perfect application for my idea because this is an enormous industry, vital to the economy, been built on generations of families. It's like the number one job. And, sort of this next generation, they're expecting more out of life, more out of their job, and kind of this better connect between your lifestyle and your career. So I thought trucking is the place, and that's how I launched the concept of Drive My Way, which is basically a personalized recruiting platform with a patented and proprietary technology that matches drivers with jobs based on their professional qualifications and personal lifestyle preferences.
And so when you are, so the Drive My Way start off as like maybe like a side hustle, or was this something that you chose to quit your full-time job and then just, dive in head first?
Yeah, actually, I was consulting at the time. I was leading really large scale transformational change
Mm.
for several organizations at a time. Most of them lasted between 2 to 5 years, depending on the size of the organization and what it is we were doing. So I still had a couple of large change management projects in the works where I still had people that were working for me completing those. But I sort of started, okay, now I'm going to transition to this other thing. What does it look like? Started building it out. And so we really didn't go live until July of 2016. When it was like, okay, this is it. We're diving all in. We're going to get this done. And it's been a whirlwind ever since. It's kind of like getting your MBA on steroids. I mean, because, being an entrepreneur and doing all of this, there's the planning pieces, but then there's the actual activation and kind of learning as you go. And, you're getting product market fit and all of those things you never even thought of to begin with that pop up. So it's been really exciting.
And so since 2016, as you've been working with, various amounts of drivers from all different walks of life, is there commonalities of what, I guess, a modern driver wants in their employment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most startling things is that drivers are, um, if you think about it, when it's generations of families, if the first job across the US was farmer, And then the most prevalent job across was truck driver. So a lot of the people entering the workforce now or in the midst of their career are folks that had, parents, grandparents, et cetera, aunts and uncles that maybe were drivers that missed the soccer game or the concert or the whatever. And now, I think they lived through that and people are looking for more. They want to feel like they're connected to something that has purpose. They want to feel like they're adding value. They want to feel like they have a good balance for their career and the life that they want to have. So things like, home time, the type of work that I'm doing, the people that I'm working with, the amount of interaction, whatever it is that's important to me, whether or not I can travel with my pet or a companion, because that's part of, what I want to do, what's important. People are really dialing in on being more selective, I think, in their career opportunities in across all types of jobs, not just truck drivers, um, because we spend so much time in our lives at work, doing work that people are trying to find a way to make it fit, so that they're getting the fulfillment that they seek. And I think COVID really helped accelerate some of that. Especially when you saw a lot of people looking for, jobs that work from home, even once people return to work, et cetera. People found a bit of balance and are seeking more of it.
That's interesting you say that because we talked for a good bit before we hit record on this conversation, and we're for full disclosure to the audience, we're recording this in the middle of the holidays. It's the middle of December. This is going to air in early January, but we're kind of struggling to really find the work-life balance of working, getting after it this time of the year, but also spending that quality time with family. And it sounds like, for the drivers themselves, they maybe have got to that realization a lot sooner than the rest of us. Is that
Yep.
maybe like a safe assumption?
Yeah. Well, all of us really, I think this time of year just accentuates it even more because it feels like we're all in a rush. But yeah, I think the other startling thing, I mean, if you think about a driver, so they're looking for, home time, routes and schedules, predictability, maybe certain type of benefits that they're looking to have covered, whether or not they want to travel with a pet or companion, what type of work they're being required to do. Do they want to load and unload, or do they just want to bump docks? Um, Whatever it is, there's work out there for everyone. There's all kinds of variety. In fact, most people don't even know all the different types of segments there are and jobs that you can do with a CDL and even without a CDL and still drive a truck. So I think it's accentuating all those different attributes and variables that are out there so that people can become educated about them and use them to make decisions. But usually pay is pretty high up on the list. But when you start comparing all factors, you start to see that other things like type of equipment's important, because if you have a high pay package for cents per mile, but the equipment the company's providing is always broken down, then you're not making any money, right? So there's a lot of things, the creature comforts, all the other things that factor in, and sometimes people are willing to make a little less, to be home a little more often, or whatever it is in terms of flexibility.
And it sounds like you're really dialed in to what a variety of drivers want. Is that so? I guess this is a good time to talk about the platform itself. Drive My Way. Are a lot of these attributes and maybe wishes for employment, is that available within the platform itself to where drivers can really hone in on exactly what they want?
Absolutely. So the process is really pretty simple. A driver comes in for free, creates a profile. The profile consists of two parts. They'll declare, all of their professional qualifications, licensing, experience, etc. And then they're also going to fill out a personal preference profile that really teases out, what are the things, when you consider this versus that, what's more important. So it gets them to thinking and having to prioritize. And then we will then produce for them basically a personalized, serving of here are the jobs and they're scored on a 10-point basis that are the best match to what you're qualified for and what you're inclined to want to do because it fits your lifestyle preferences.
Do you find that companies are starting to become more accommodating to the driver's wishes?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, one of the most exciting parts of what we're doing, because the driver really controls their profile and who they engage with. So it's really a personalized experience on both sides, the driver as well as the recruiter, because now you get to recruit the way maybe you would want to be recruited if you were looking for a job. And it's not so much, I mean, it's a sell, but it's not so much a sell. It's, hey, I'm talking to you because Drive My Ways already helped curate this meaningful connection between us because I already know that you meet my minimum job qualifications. I already know that this is something you're genuinely interested in because it fits up with your lifestyle preferences. And you took that positive action to express interest in this job. Like nobody shared your data. I mean, you took the step as a driver. So now it changes the conversation. Now it's a deeper dive in, on both sides, interviewing each other, really kind of a little bit more about the job, a day in the life, what's the company like, those types of things to determine whether or not it's going to be a fit. And that's where there's, time well spent versus just trying to chase, blindly chase leads and, lists and people, that you maybe got. So it's really making hiring personal again
Hmm.
by treating that driver as a consumer now.
Has there been any kind of like shifts in how drivers want to? I mean, we mentioned like the home time and things like that, but has that shifted since? I feel like COVID is such a a catalyst for so many ways that we think about life and what we want out of it, what we want out of work. Were these trends already happening before COVID, or and have they stayed around since COVID?
Yeah, that's a good point. So the exciting piece on the data that we have, I think the desire and the attempt was always there, but what we're now seeing, and even just pre and now definitely post COVID, is the driver's really high in demand. And as it becomes more difficult to attract and retain drivers because people are sort of inserting themselves, they're kind of demanding more lifestyle, carriers are having to respond by changing the employment value proposition, and in some cases, even going so far as to change somewhat of their operational model in an effort to get people home more often, in an effort to try to, accommodate when there are, longer load times or whatever it is. So I think, carriers have really listened and continue to want to get the feedback on, what can we do to help a better attract and retain you. And I think our driver happiness survey that we did one in 2019 and we just released another one in 2023. And it's pretty startling. The happiness has dropped off overall between 2019 and 2023.
Hmm.
Those that are the least happy in their jobs are people that have been in with 1 to 2 years of experience. Um, all of a sudden, we're seeing that drivers who are even reporting that they're happy, that they've also looked for a job in the last 3 months. So, they're sort of out there taking stock. Even though I'm happy, I think with the current state of freight, everybody's just kind of looking around to see what's going on. And here's what's happening at my carrier, but what's happening elsewhere. But the other big one is we usually see like in the top, 5 things that are most important, things like pay, equipment, those, home time, obviously. But this year, pay was number one again. And number two is, when they're asked, what could your employer do to help increase your happiness? It's actually communication and listening from management. Number two, and nearly 61% of those that ranked that had been in their role less than 2 years, and twice as many were women versus men. So I think you're now starting to see the profile change and the like a new higher level set of expectations from drivers And I think that's great because that's setting a challenge for management. We really, not only do you have to tune in and dial in and constantly be sort of re-recruiting the people who already work for you, and that sentiments will change, but how do we, make this part of the fabric of the organization and continue to have these conversations so that, when their needs change or your needs change, I mean, people are all on the same page and you're developing that deeper level of commitment and rapport, not just communicating at people, but really building that relationship. And it's not necessarily something I think people think about as often. You think about, well, we ought to get the memo out to people or make sure, I'm talking about literally changing the way that they do business
Hmm.
and communicating with their drivers to create more of that sense of internal community and the sort of employee voice piece and the
Any
connectivity to
kind of,
leadership.
well, are there any kind of, I guess, maybe like specific things that some of these companies are doing? Is it, you mentioned communicating. Is it, as simple as like picking up the phone once a week to just call and check in? Or is it, like maybe employee meetups or something like that? Are there any things that, these companies are doing that they're finding success in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first question is those that first recognize that it's important to spark the conversation, are embarking on using survey tools, sentiment analysis tools,
Mm.
right? So that's first. But that comes with great responsibility, right? Because once you ask, the worst thing you can do is not respond or not like the answer and then not know what to do with it. So it's sort of first deciding, is this the right thing? Then it's, well, how do I go about it? What do I want to know? What do we ask? What conversation are we trying to create? And then sort of teaching leaders how to walk through that. And because sometimes, people get feedback and they think, well, we're just not going to answer that. Well,
Mm.
it's better to try to explain why. I mean, just because they said they want something and you're not going to be able to deliver on that, that's for valid business reasons, that's fine. But don't ignore it. At least address and acknowledge that, this seems to be important to you. We've considered it. Here's, some of the business challenges that are prohibiting us from, making that step or whatever it is. So that at least everything is open and transparent. So I think, yeah, people are doing, initiating surveys. I think people are trying to create more vehicles of communication, whether it's a call, a closed Facebook group with their fleet, so that people can, reach out, ask questions, all of the above. I think the one-on-one connection with your driver manager, dispatchers, doing some more work on, teaming up on how we can all communicate with each other better between dispatchers and driver managers. And then senior leaders being more open and transparent, not just about the numbers, but get down to, you tell me what are your struggles when you're trying to, execute a delivery. And really listening to some of the challenges that drivers are being faced with, and then, look across and be willing to say, okay, we've heard you, and here's some things that, we can do about that.
Is it as simple as just getting that constant feedback loop for these drivers, or are there maybe some other issues that are almost like red flags or warnings that would cause a driver to even think about what that next step could look like, even think about what maybe a move to a different company would look like? Would communication solve that, or are there other maybe some red flags that drivers see and they're like, maybe I should, think about getting another job somewhere else?
That's a good point. To me, I really feel like creating the culture and the environment where it's a given, where people feel comfortable with that communication, that line of communication is open, is so important, because I feel perhaps even more volatile than in any other industry. Drivers are more likely to just have something happen and be like, that's it, I'm out of here. And then they'll just leave. There's no, let me talk to you about why I'm upset, or, see if we can work this out, or, hey, I've had a change in my life or my schedule, what can be done. it was oftentimes they'll immediately revert to, well, I've got to go. And that's not necessarily the case always. I mean, it doesn't hurt to have a conversation with your current organization, especially if you're happy, to see what can be done in terms of accommodating you. They just historically haven't led with that. And then there's a whole bunch of other things that you should be monitoring, things like your candidate experience. You know, when we're hearing that people that have only had 1 to 2 years experience or been in their job 1 to 2 years are the least happy, well, gosh, they most recently joined the organization. So how did they go from being super excited about joining and then going through onboarding, and then what drastically drops off after that? What happens? Same thing with your employee experience throughout their whole life cycle of their career, and everything from onboarding all the way through offboarding, retirement, or them leaving the organization, and even following up with them after the fact on, you know, how did it go, exit interviews, all those kinds of things. There's so many different opportunities that you could be taking advantage of, and also even looking at your data in anticipation of, you know, things that are happening. It could be something as simple as you're facing a 30% increase this year in your benefit, rates, and leadership sitting back and thinking, gosh, how is this going to impact our people? What's the best way we can do to prepare for these things? What's most important to people? Being able to tap into that audience and measure some of that to guide your decision making is helpful. And it's done in more of I call it a commitment based change, where now people are feeling like, yes, it's a very black and white problem, but we're feeling like we're participating in the company helping figure out what's the best solution for us. So that goes a long way versus the compliance based change where people are used to, well, because the leader said so, etc. I mean, it really feels very one sided.
And it's interesting you say that, because I've heard of this, establishing like a driver feedback loop where you're constantly getting this feedback from your drivers on a regular basis. So you can maybe identify some of these problems before they turn into, a mass exodus, or, you got top talent that's leaving the company. Is there any difference, I guess, in are there any companies that are doing a really good job of listening to their drivers, and or maybe some programs that exist that they are practicing, I guess, practicing what they preach and retaining those drivers for good versus just trying to, fill another, recruiting quota?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think there are folks that are doing, some of the very basics, whether it's regular, the monthly call, doing one-up conversations. So, skip a level in terms of who you report to. And, you're taking a selection of people that's different every month, and they get to sit down with the head of transportation or the CEO or whoever it
Oh,
is.
that's interesting.
That's just creating those, tentacles where people feel like they can, have an opportunity to connect. You've got folks doing, like I said, Facebook groups, that with like a closed group. You've got people doing surveys, like more formal surveys, and then sort of sentiment, kind of pulse type surveys, if you will. And then, I've also seen, the old fireside chats. I think those are all great. And to the extent things get recorded, I think the biggest thing is, one, make sure that they're happening, whatever the method is. And two, because it's a distributed workforce, it's really difficult. It's not like you can call everybody together in the same place at the same time. And so you don't want the telephone game to take into effect. So you're either recording it, and even if you're recording it, you're spending a lot of time between the senior leaders and the drivers, or, the sort of different layers in the organization, so that you're spending a ton of time with middle management, so that when you're cascading messages, that group actually is equipped with the talking points, the meeting in a box, okay, we've had these are the key messages of this, company meeting, this division meeting, whatever it is. And when we distill it down and get it out there, here are the follow-up talking points so that everybody's hearing, consistency in the messaging, same time, same points. And then it's not just cascading down, but you've created then a mechanism to feed back up. Hey, I had this cascade meeting, to make sure everybody heard it, and we talked about, the communication meeting that happened, and here was some feedback that came from the group. So there's got to be a full cycle that it gets back up to leadership, and that it's fed back down. We heard you. We understand after we had our meeting last month that there were some questions about. Let us further clarify or communicate further, or that there's perhaps an issue that we were not aware of. We're going to create a focus group or a task group and assign them the responsibility for coming up with some recommendations that we can consider, and together we'll come up with the right answer. It's all the old employee engagement, people being a part of it. Nobody can help solve the problem better than the people who are hands-on experiencing it. And I think also too, leaders to get and walk in the shoes of the people that they're trying to serve. I mean, you're serving people as a leader, so get in their shoes and do the work. I mean, I try to ask myself, I like to think that I don't ask people to do anything that I wouldn't do myself, and I try, if I feel like I'm having high standards, to say, have I done it myself? What did it take when I did it, and am I really asking something that's way out there?
I love that because I got my start in freight when I worked for a asset-based 3PL, and the CEO, who I was his direct assistant, he was a former driver. And so he always had an open door policy, and the drivers that worked for our company knew that they could walk in right through the front door and walk right in his office and have a conversation with him. I mean, the drivers absolutely loved that he was a former driver, even so much so that one of the drivers got the company name tattooed on his back from shoulder to shoulder. Now, unfortunately, that company closed down, so that guy is stuck with that tattoo. But it was, I always really respected that from my old boss, is that he had that open door policy, and that the drivers really loved talking to him, and that they knew that something would happen after talking to him. Is it kind of a safe assumption that that's where the most companies are succeeding if it comes to driver recruiting, is that they're listening to their drivers and they're keeping their best talent?
Yeah, absolutely. Listening and responding. And I think in those instances, you have the people who sort of have the guts to go in there and have that conversation. But
Mm.
what a really good leader will do is, if they're having those conversations, they're going to outwardly talk about, hey, it's my understanding that, I'm hearing from the ranks or whatever that we're having these challenges. So they're not calling out the people that brought it to them specifically, but they're making sure that the conversation's out there so that the other people who weren't in that office at that time are also now having the benefit of that transaction, that information exchange, and the leader's point of view on it, or whatever action was taken. Because if people are just feeding up individual complaints, if you will, and sometimes you would like to think that they're not all complaints. Sometimes they're just saying, hey, I really appreciate you fixed X, Y, and Z, or it's a positive thing. But you have to make sure that the people aren't left behind, because they weren't there at the time when that was said. So you want to make sure that everybody's aware, that these things are happening, and you keep it front and center. We asked, you answered. Here's what we're doing about it. What else? What are we missing? How else? Can we get you involved?
Yeah, I think all great lessons, and I want to switch gears a little bit, because I want to talk about some of your marketing initiatives, because we originally met at TMSA, Transportation Marketing and Sales Association, and marketing plays a huge role in your business. I'm curious as to how your marketing has evolved over the years when you're targeting drivers versus targeting companies. Is it kind of the same strategy, or do you have different approaches to both?
Well, it's kind of funny that you said that. Like, when we first started, I was just showing my sales team this, because you forget, you're a startup, you're young, and we had the chicken and the egg. No drivers are going to come and sign up and become part of our community unless we have jobs, and nobody's going to work with us to get their jobs posted unless we have drivers. So it's a little bit of both. You have to build up this community. Well, we've always done it through content initially, and we still do. We write all of our own original content that celebrates the American truck driver and the intersect between their lifestyle and their career. And uh, we're all about it being a personal experience, making hiring personal again. So literally, when we first had drivers start signing up with us, we had these little cards. I was just showing my sales team. Did you guys know we used to write? Because they were saying, well, we wrote our handwritten cards for all of our Christmas cards, and my hand hurts. And I'm like, we used to write a handwritten card to every single driver that signed up with us. Just as another, hey, thank you, we see you. There would be a lot of cards now. I don't even know if anybody would be able to keep up with it, but it's always looking at everything we're doing and, are we really living up to the brand in being personal? And I think the biggest shift in our marketing is that Drive My Way is an experience. It truly is. I mean, is it a service? Is it a product? Is it a solution? It's all those things. But the truth is, it's an experience on both sides. So we use storytelling of the people who have had the opportunity to have the Drive My Way experience lead our marketing. So when a driver is hired by a carrier that they got from Drive My Way, we immediately reach out to that. We have a role on the team called matchmaker. All the matchmakers do. They work part-time days, nights, and weekends. It's the greatest job ever. They're amazing, and they absolutely love working with the drivers. And they reach out and congratulate the driver, let them know that we're setting their profile to unavailable so that now they won't continue to get matched now that they found the carrier that they're going to stay working with. And we give them the opportunity to tell us what it was like to work with Drive My Way. So they get like a little survey. They can put in a written testimonial, they can record it with just their voice, or they can make a video. And they actually make videos and send them in to us. And they're fantastic, and you get them in their real environment. They're in the back of the cab or they're home on their reclining chair or whatever. And they talk about, how Drive My Way helped, what it is what they were looking for, how it was different. And so they're able to express what that experience was like firsthand so that then other people who are thinking about it will see that and can maybe identify with any one or more of those stories. And then likewise, we use our employer case studies and actual recruiters, recruiting managers, recruiting leaders stories on how they go about their role and what's important to them and how they're utilizing or partnering with Drive My Way to tell that side of the story as well. We call it trucking truth, or we do a case study.
Do you have a favorite or two from the stories you've gotten so far?
I gosh, there's so many, and I love every day I get some kind of an acknowledgement or call out from the matchmakers. But I actually remember one. It was a holiday. I can't remember which holiday, but we had a lot of people that were off, and it was a Saturday. It was over a holiday weekend, and I was working, and one of the calls came through to me, and it was one of the drivers. And he was frustrated because he was trying to, update something to his profile. And so I was helping him out, and we just kind of got to talking. And, he's like, I just so frustrated. I love my job. I'm an over the road driver. I've been doing it for more than 15 years. He's like, I love my company. And I was like, well, why are you looking for another job? Like, what, why are you even on Drive My Way? And he said, well, my wife just came down with cancer, and I'm going to need to be home here, helping get her to and from her treatments. And I just need to be around more. And unfortunately, my company's all over the road. We don't have anything local. And he's like, and so I never even thought I'd ever be in this position to have to look for another job. And I have no idea what I'm doing. So we just kind of walk through it. So those are the kind of stories that, and then they come back to you and say, gosh, you were there for me, helping me sort through what was to me chaos. I couldn't figure out what I needed and zero right in on exactly what I needed at exactly the time I needed it. And so it's those kinds of things where it just touches you, and you realize that, yes, you always want to be doing right by people and adding value. But when you realize that you're genuinely impacting people's lives every day and their families. That makes it pretty exciting. And then on the carrier side, I love the stories of um, how somebody got into their role as a recruiter, and how it's kind of changed how they go about recruiting. Um, I only say that because I am one of these firm believers that most people don't take a linear path to their career. That your professional self is really this compilation of experiences that you've had and this transferable set of skills that you've built over time that make you who you are, and how you've developed into being good at the things that you're contributing. So I love to hear stories from people, how it shaped ultimately the professional that they are today. And we recently did an interview with David Pike, who is the head of recruiting for NFI, and it was very emotional for me. It was especially like this time of year too. I mean, here we are on Saturday. We're going to be doing Reads Across America, and David comes from a military background, and he tells a whole story. It's on our blog if you'd like to check it out, drivemyway.com. And he tells the story of being a young man who went off into the military and Marines, and he was in his role, and then they actually approached him about being a recruiter for the military. And he went through extensive training to do this. And when he realized as a military recruiter that he was literally completely impacting these young men and women's lives, like for the rest of their life. And he told this story about this one gentleman that literally changed the trajectory of this young man's life, and how he came back to him and said, I don't know if you realize what you did for me, and thank you. And he's brought that forward in the recruiting role today, because I think so often, sometimes we get into a mode where we're so busy, we're processing things, it's, check it off the list, check it off the list. And we don't ever stop to think for a minute that, like, wait a minute, these are real people. Like, they need this job. Like, I'm in a position I can either move them forward or not even acknowledge that they came in to begin with. And I hear today so many people, kind of claiming, I think they took the human out of human resources. I submit all of these resumes, or I, apply to all these jobs. I never hear back from anybody. And, to hear David tell this story on how he imparts on each and every one of his recruiters and how he operates himself, that never forget the importance of the job that you're doing, and that, every interaction, whether it's the right fit for the driver right now or later or never, that you're impacting somebody's life. So it really puts it in a very different perspective. And I love to hear those kinds of stories, because I think professionally, we all grow from being able to, if we're able to leave ourselves vulnerable and share with each other. I think that's positive. We just did a really fun thing at TMSA in Chicago, where we brought all the sales and marketing folks in, Kathleen Keg and I, and facilitated a little session on just how, like, incredible change in the function of marketing over the years. I mean, people in marketing are being asked to be the be all end all of everything. I mean, all the assignments that you're given, everything from board decks to, you have to do, sales leads, to your outbound, you're doing internal employee communications, and it's gone crazy. And it was interesting to have, sort of, very confidential, everybody kind of going around the room, and you realize how much they all have in common at all different, sort of stages of their career, and the incredible sort of camaraderie or bonding that occurred, because every person that was telling their story or their challenge, in some way, the others in the room could relate or had faced something similar. So they were literally sort of like helping each other live in the room, and just to feel like that kind of that support, like I lived through that, or I'm in the midst of that now. And I was like, this is really something we should all be doing this, no matter what the career is, right? Because that's how we're better together.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because TMSA it's one of those events where it's not going to be the most people in the industry that's going to attend. What's the beauty of the TMSA is like the smaller community that you can build, and through those like-minded experiences and be able to feel like you're not alone. And I think
Yes.
that that's, what the TMSA creates. It sounds like that's what you're, creating at Drive My Way too. And I'm curious, with all of the drivers and the carriers that you've spoken to, and especially with, being in this industry since 2016, are there any differences between, I imagine there's some differences between, that I heard that the average age of a truck driver in the United States is somewhere around like 56 years old. Are there
Mhm.
any differences between what the 56-year-old truck driver wants and the 24-year-old truck driver? Or are they kind of the same pay and at home time?
They're somewhat similar, but there are differences. They have differences in how they prefer to communicate.
Hmm.
I can tell you that drivers overall that are sort of older, when I say older, I'm going to say over 40, 45 or older. Um, in 2023, 50% of them are happy. In 2023, those under 45, only 50, about 54% are happy.
Hmm.
But there's been a decline in the drivers under 45's level of happiness between 2019 and 2023. So I think that as you move up, both in age and in experience, your, I guess, level of expectations and the things that are most important to you change. I think we just had this conversation prior to recording on when you kind of hit certain stages in your life. Um, Sometimes you have a greater appreciation for things that you might not even have thought of earlier in your career, and then you assign a higher value to that. Like, we were talking earlier about it coming up on the holidays, and as as you age, how much more precious the gift of time becomes, right? That's not something you're not thinking of the gift of time when you're 22.
I love, yeah. If I talk about it again, I'm gonna cry for like the third time on this episode, or since we
You and me
started
both.
talking.
We can't do this waterproof mascara for
You
these.
know, exactly. I think it really is, it really brings, I think, the conversation full circle because you're talking about the value of a driver's time, and so much of it is wasted by other companies, by warehouse operations, loading and unloading times, and things like that. That it's not just the work, I think, that is impacting drivers. It's also just the lack of respect around how their time is treated versus everybody
Yeah.
else's. And so that's why I think what you're doing is so valuable, because you're putting the power back in the driver's hands and able to give them the decision making prowess to be able to find that other gig. I think sometimes it's really hard to think about what that next gig could look like, especially when you're in your current, just sort of schedule and normal day everyday activities. And so you're creating that catalyst, for them to be able to find that little bit better of a job. Might not be perfect, I don't think any job is, but you're at least
Right.
giving them that opportunity to find something better to give them back their time. um
Yes.
as we sort of round out, this conversation, is there anything else that you feel like is important to mention about what you do, Drive My Way, things like that, or just the industry as a whole that we haven't already talked about?
Yeah, to me, we're all in this together. This is what one of the most incredible industries to work in. You know it, I know it. The people are what really makes the difference. Um, there's nothing like the supply chain. Without it, nothing would run. And the amount of dedication and just pure commitment and um, uh, you know, get it done at all costs effort that goes into the supply chain is just really something that um, I hope everybody has an appreciation for. And any opportunity that we get where we can share with each other and all of the different aspects of the supply chain can listen to what they appreciate and what they need from each other, the better it'll be. So, I think we're here, obviously talking to the drivers, but it goes to the dispatchers, to the maintenance techs, to everyone, because nobody can actually, the one thing about the supply chain is nothing can get done. Nobody can do their job without the other people doing their job. So it really is a group effort. And I think we go through the good times together and we go through the tough times together. And it's how we show up and how we own it and how the leaders step up and lead and bring people along with them. We're doing this together. That makes us stronger. And so that just was what I think about when I reflect on this really tough year everybody's had. We've been through some stuff. You go from COVID to this, to like, what the heck else? But we come out stronger every time, and we get challenged to not even know what we're capable of, right? And we become capable of so much more when we realize that we're part of something bigger, and we're not in it alone, and we're able to do it together. So I guess no matter where you sit or where you work, or what you do, whether you're within the supply chain or one of the lucky people that is the recipient of all the supply chain's efforts, that you just take a second, in this season, especially to just reflect and be appreciative of what we all have, and be cognizant of the great level of responsibility that it brings with it, and that we keep it going.
Very well said. Beth, it took us a long time to have this conversation, but I'm
It
glad
did.
that we had it at this time of the year. I think it's a really great reflection and really great sort of signal for the coming years, as far as the resiliency of this industry and breaking down these silos, and continuing to have those communication doors open. Is there any, I guess, piece of advice would you give to carriers out there that are struggling to recruit drivers, struggling to retain drivers, or just keep good drivers? Was there any kind of advice that you would give them to best prepare for 2024?
Yeah, I think it's not a matter of when things are going to change, or if they're going to change, it's when. I don't think anybody has a crystal ball. I think everybody's used to being um, cautious. We're not going to run right in. We're going to kind of, make sure things are headed in the right direction. And they are. I really do believe that. But I think people need to um, realize and be more planful that you can't just flip a switch. Because what's going to happen is, we're all sort of trying to read the tea leaves and adjust accordingly with all of our operations so that we can win. And as things start to pick up, and they really will, and it'll start to happen quickly. It's going to happen to each and every one of us, and realize that when that's happening, we're going to start over again, and that everybody's going to be trying to recruit. Everybody's going to be trying, so start now. I mean, you should be constantly having those conversations and nurturing, so that when the time comes, you've made that connection, you're ready to make that hire, that person's ready to make the move. Maybe they're not ready right now. And don't ignore the people that are working for you now. You should be re-recruiting them all the time, because, we hear that when change happens, it leaves people wondering. So keep the lines of communication open, have the conversations with your current people to making sure that you're hearing sentiment and keeping on track with how everyone's feeling and what's happening and how you're going through it together. And then never stop creating the connections externally and nurturing those relationships so that you can surround yourself with the best talent.
Another gem that that you dropped, Beth. It was a great conversation. Where can
To
folks,
Blythe.
I guess, if they want to step up their game in 2024, if they want to, keep those lines of communication open, where can, carriers reach out, and if drivers, if they're looking to make a lifestyle change, or a time management change to a better opportunity, where can folks, follow more of you and your work?
Yep, you can contact me at bpotratz@drivemyway.com. You can just hit us up on drivemyway.com.
Absolutely love it. This was a gem of a conversation. So thank you again, Beth.
Thanks so much.